On a freezing Chicago night, Adrian Blackwood quietly followed Hannah Miller, the curvy maid who disappeared after every shift. He expected secret meetings, stolen information, or betrayal. Instead, he found her working a second job at a struggling rehabilitation center, giving away nearly every dollar she earned to keep strangers alive. That unexpected discovery became the first step toward exposing a conspiracy that reached into his own foundation, uncovered the truth behind his brother Caleb's death, and changed two lonely lives forever. Snow drifted across the empty streets of Chicago as Adrian Blackwood eased his unmarked black sedan through the shadows. He should have been reviewing contracts worth millions or preparing for tomorrow's meeting with rival shipping executives. Instead, the most feared man in the city found himself following a maid. Every evening at exactly 6, Hannah Miller quietly left the Blackwood estate through the servants' gate. She never asked for overtime. She never accepted rides home. Tonight was no different. Wrapped in an old grey coat, her full figure disappeared beneath the falling snow as she boarded a crowded train, then another, before climbing onto a worn city bus headed toward the aging waterfront district. Adrian kept his distance. His security chief had warned him this routine had continued for weeks. A trusted employee slipping away every night could mean stolen information, secret meetings, or something far worse. In Adrian's world, loyalty was never assumed. It had to survive suspicion. The bus finally stopped beside a weathered brick building with a faded blue sign. Harbor Light Rehabilitation Center. The windows glowed with tired yellow light. Paint peeled from the walls. A banner hanging above the entrance read, 18 days until closure. Adrian watched Hannah step inside. Minutes later, she returned wearing faded medical scrubs instead of her maid's uniform. She wasn't cleaning. She gently helped an elderly veteran steady himself between parallel bars. She calmed another patient struggling to breathe through a panic attack. She adjusted wheelchairs, organized medication trays, folded blankets, and smiled with a warmth no paycheck could buy. Hours passed. The city grew quieter. Inside, Hannah never slowed, despite the exhaustion visible in every movement. Near midnight, Dr. Samuel Pierce handed her a small envelope. She counted the cash only once. Then, without hesitation, she walked to an old metal donation box beneath the closure notice and slipped every bill inside. Not most of it, every dollar. Adrian stared through the rain-speckled windshield, unable to understand what he had just witnessed. When the lights finally dimmed, Hannah picked up a paper bag containing only half a loaf of bread. Instead of leaving, she quietly entered a dark room at the end of the hallway. "I'm sorry, Ethan. Your sister is late again." The young veteran answered with a faint smile instead of words. Hannah adjusted the blanket over his knees, set the half loaf of bread beside him, and began checking the notes clipped to his wheelchair. She asked about his exercises before asking about herself. That was who she had always been. Other people's pain reached her first. 3 weeks earlier, before Adrian Blackwood ever wondered where she disappeared each night, Hannah had been almost invisible inside the Blackwood estate. Every morning the marble halls echoed with polished shoes, rolling carts, and quiet orders from supervisors. Hannah carried towering stacks of fresh linens through corridors lined with priceless paintings, while whispers followed close behind. "She's too slow." Maybe if she carried fewer snacks. Soft laughter spread from one maid to another. She never answered. Instead, she smiled politely and continued folding towels with careful precision. The same hands that repaired torn uniforms after every shift quietly slipped homemade lunches into empty lockers when someone couldn't afford food. A gardener found his ripped gloves stitched overnight. A frightened dishwasher discovered a note that simply read, "Tomorrow can be better." No one ever knew. The notes came from Hannah. One afternoon, a frightened new maid accidentally dropped an antique porcelain vase. The crash silenced the grand staircase. Mrs. Linda Walsh, the estate's stern housekeeping manager, stormed across the floor. "Do you realize what you've done?" The young woman burst into tears. Before another word could be spoken, Hannah stepped forward. "I should have helped carry it," she said softly. Linda's sharp eyes narrowed. "So, you'll clean every piece before dinner?" "Yes, Ma'am." She never mentioned that she hadn't touched the vase. From the second-floor balcony, Adrian paused on his way to a board meeting. He watched Hannah kneel alone on the cold marble, carefully gathering every broken piece while everyone else returned to work. She accepted blame that wasn't hers. For reasons he couldn't explain, the image followed him long after he walked away. That evening, Hannah opened her first paycheck of the month. She quietly removed $15, folded the rest into her worn canvas bag, and locked her apartment door before heading back into the freezing Chicago night. The following morning, the Blackwood estate looked as flawless as ever. Crystal chandeliers reflected the winter sunlight, fireplaces warmed endless hallways, and black luxury SUVs rolled through the front gates every few minutes. Inside the private conference room, Adrian Blackwood met with shipping executives and trusted advisors. Contracts covered the polished table while maps of Chicago's ports glowed across a digital screen. No one noticed the moment his left leg stiffened beneath the table. 7 years had passed since the ambush that claimed Caleb's life, yet the damaged nerves still reminded Adrian of that night without warning. He shifted slightly, hiding the pain behind the same unreadable expression that had frightened rivals for years. Only one person saw the change. Hannah had entered quietly to replace the coffee service. She noticed his fingers tightening around a crystal glass, the uneven pressure on his right foot, and the faint tremor running through his jaw. It was the same posture Ethan slipped into before his muscles locked. Without speaking, she deliberately let a silver serving tray slide from her hands. The sharp clang echoed through the room. Every executive turned toward the sound. The unexpected interruption gave Adrian 3 precious minutes to remain seated while everyone focused on the startled maid instead of him. "I'm so sorry," Hannah whispered, kneeling to gather the scattered spoons. As she reached the head of the table, she left a small heating pack beside Adrian's chair, along with a folded note. "Don't stand yet. Breathe slowly. The pain will ease." She walked away before he could react. By the time the meeting resumed, the burning sensation had begun to fade. After everyone left, Adrian unfolded the note again. Tucked beneath it was another sheet of paper Hannah hadn't realized she'd dropped. Across the top, in neat handwriting, were the words, "Physical Recovery Exercises Patient, Ethan Miller." For the first time, Adrian found himself wondering not who Hannah worked for, but who she had once been. The answer refused to wait. That night, after Hannah finished helping the last patient into bed, Adrian stepped through Harbor Light's worn front door. The old building smelled of coffee, antiseptic, and fresh bread. A tired receptionist looked up, surprised to see a man whose tailored coat probably cost more than the center's monthly utility bill. Dr. Samuel Pierce appeared from the hallway, before anyone could ask questions. "I've seen your face on television," the older physician said with a gentle smile. "People usually come here looking for donations. You look like you're searching for answers." Adrian's eyes settled on the metal donation box. "Hannah," Dr. Pierce followed his gaze and sighed. "She'll be upset if she learns I told you anything." He invited Adrian into a tiny office where faded photographs covered the walls. One showed a younger Hannah wearing hospital scrubs beside Ethan, who stood proudly in military uniform before the accident changed everything. She was 1 semester away from becoming a physical therapist, Dr. Pierce explained quietly. Then Ethan came home with injuries no family was prepared for. She left school the next day. Adrian remained silent. "She doesn't owe this place money," the doctor continued. "Quite the opposite. Years ago, we couldn't save a patient because insurance ended before treatment did. Hannah promised herself no one else would ever lose hope because they were poor." The doctor's voice grew softer. "Every paycheck she earns goes into keeping these doors open." He slid a folded document across the desk. It was an eviction notice. Across the top, bold letters announced that Harbour Light would close in 18 days unless the property changed hands. Adrian's expression darkened. "Who owns the building?" Dr. Pierce hesitated. "An investment company." He lowered his voice even further. "They recently received funding through the Blackwood Community Foundation." Adrian looked up sharply. "My foundation?" Dr. Pierce nodded. "I don't believe you knew." As snow drifted outside the frosted windows, Adrian realized someone had been using his own charitable organization to quietly destroy the one place Hannah had sacrificed everything to protect. For the first time in years, suspicion turned inward instead of outward. The next morning, the Blackwood estate woke beneath a pale winter sunrise. Servants hurried through polished hallways carrying breakfast trays, while executives waited in the glass conference room overlooking frozen gardens. Adrian ignored them all. Instead of ordering Harbour Light to be purchased, he called his chief advisor. "Restore every dollar deducted unfairly from household staff wages," he said, quietly. The advisor blinked. "Only Miss Miller?" "Everyone." That afternoon, Hannah discovered several employees had received corrected pay envelopes. No explanation came with them. She simply smiled when an elderly groundskeeper whispered that someone had finally listened. Later, Adrian found her reorganizing the linen inventory. "You designed this system?" he asked. Hannah nodded carefully. "It wastes less fabric and saves time. No one showed it to me. I wasn't asked." There was no bitterness in her voice. Somehow that troubled him more. He watched her demonstrate color-coded storage, repair records, and handwritten notes that prevented expensive supplies from being thrown away. She had quietly saved the estate thousands of dollars without asking for recognition. As they walked through the laundry room, Adrian finally asked the question that had followed him home. "If you've been treated unfairly, why didn't you report it?" Hannah folded a fresh tablecloth before answering. "Because people with power usually notice injustice only after it reaches their office." She looked at him for the first time. "I couldn't spend my life waiting for someone important to walk into the right room." The words landed harder than any accusation. Adrian remembered every hallway he had crossed without looking, every complaint dismissed as someone else's responsibility, every silent moment that had allowed cruelty to become routine beneath his own roof. For years he had believed distance made him strong. Now it looked a lot like neglect. That evening, he ordered a late-night shuttle for every employee working after dark instead of only Hannah. When the announcement spread through the mansion, surprised smiles replaced exhausted sighs. But not everyone welcomed the change. From the far end of the corridor, Vanessa Crowe watched Adrian slip Hannah's inventory proposal into his briefcase instead of the discard pile. The crystal champagne flute in Vanessa's hand cracked beneath her tightening fingers. Softly, almost to herself, she whispered, "So, she's the reason you've started paying attention." Vanessa Crowe smiled before anyone could notice the crack in her champagne glass. She had spent years beside Adrian Blackwood at charity dinners, board meetings, and political galas. Everyone in Chicago assumed she would eventually become Mrs. Blackwood. Now a quiet maid from the laundry room had begun changing the man who never changed for anyone. Within days, Vanessa started asking careful questions. Who approved Hannah's schedule? Why did she leave every night? Why had Adrian suddenly requested financial records connected to Harbor Light? Daniel Cross, the foundation's chief financial officer, answered with visible unease. She works there after hours. She also has access to patient files. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Then she may have seen something she shouldn't. A week later, Adrian announced he would personally visit Harbor Light under the Foundation's community outreach program. Reporters believed it was another routine public appearance. Hannah almost refused to attend until Dr. Pierce quietly reminded her that the patients deserved every possible chance to keep their home. The center buzzed with nervous excitement as television crews unpacked cameras near the entrance. Inside, Ethan greeted Adrian with surprising warmth. "My sister says you're stubborn." Adrian allowed himself the smallest smile. "I've heard the same about her." As they toured the therapy wing, Adrian's injured leg suddenly weakened halfway down a narrow staircase. Marcus Reed instinctively stepped forward, but Hannah gently raised one hand. "Please." She turned toward Adrian instead. "Shift your weight to the rail." He hesitated. "Trust your right leg first." The pain tightened across his face. Again. Slowly, one careful step became another. By the time they reached the landing, Adrian was standing on his own. No one applauded. No one rushed to rescue him. Hannah had protected something far more important than his balance, his dignity. Their eyes met for only a moment. For the first time since Caleb's death, Adrian realized someone had helped him without making him feel broken. Across the therapy room, Vanessa watched the silent exchange from behind a television camera. She wasn't seeing compassion. She was seeing influence. That evening, she entered Daniel Cross's office without knocking. "If Hannah starts connecting Harbor Light to our property purchases," she said quietly, "everything we've spent years hiding disappears." Daniel looked toward the locked filing cabinet. Vanessa rested one hand on the drawer. "Before she earns Adrian's complete trust." She smiled without warmth. "We make sure he never believes her." 3 nights later, the Blackwood Foundation hosted its annual charity gala inside the Grand Riverside Hotel. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above hundreds of guests while the Chicago skyline reflected across the ballroom windows. Politicians, businesses, and reporters filled the room. Hannah had been assigned to the service staff, quietly refilling glasses and clearing tables, hoping to remain invisible. Vanessa had other plans. Just before the program began, she handed Hannah a white server's jacket that was obviously 2 sizes too small. When Hannah hesitated, Linda Walsh folded her arms. "Either wear it or go home." Hannah buttoned it anyway. She could already hear whispers following her across the ballroom. Vanessa waited until every camera was pointed toward the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced smoothly, "I'd like you to meet someone whose devotion to our foundation has become quite remarkable." Every head turned. Hannah froze. Vanessa invited her onto the stage with a pleasant smile that never reached her eyes. "I understand you've become very close to Mr. Blackwood." Nervous laughter spread through the audience. Before Hannah could answer, a security guard stepped forward, holding a prescription bottle. "We found this in her apron." The label carried Adrian's name. The ballroom fell silent. Several guests exchanged knowing looks. Reporters immediately lifted their cameras. Vanessa sighed dramatically. "It breaks my heart when kindness is mistaken for opportunity." For one painful moment, memories flooded back. Hannah remembered landlords who had judged her before hearing her name, employers who assumed she was dishonest because she was poor, and strangers who believed a black woman with a full figure should be grateful for whatever scraps life offered. She felt every eye measuring her again. Then something changed. Instead of lowering her head, Hannah walked toward the microphone. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "If you're going to decide who I am," she said quietly, "please let me tell you my own story before someone else tells it for me." The room grew perfectly still. Vanessa's smile faded for the first time that evening. At the back of the ballroom, the elevator doors opened. Adrian Blackwood stepped out, took one look at the bottle in the guard's hand, then turned toward the security director. His voice carried across the silent room. "Play the surveillance footage from my private office." No one moved. No one dared speak. Vanessa suddenly realized the next few minutes could destroy everything she had spent years building. The ballroom lights dimmed as the security director connected Adrian's private office cameras to the giant screens above the stage. Guests watched in complete silence. The recording showed Adrian sitting alone after a strategy meeting, his face tightening as another wave of nerve pain struck his injured leg. He reached for his prescription bottle with trembling fingers, then hesitated, clearly unable to focus. Seconds later, Hannah entered carrying fresh coffee. She immediately noticed something everyone else had missed. Instead of handing him the medication, she quietly picked up the bottle, counted the remaining tablets, then compared the dosage with the physician's instructions inside the package. "You already took one," she said gently on the recording. "Another now could make you dizzy." She set the bottle aside and placed the heating pack against his leg instead. 3 minutes later, Adrian's breathing slowed. The video ended. Silence filled the ballroom before Adrian finally spoke. "Hannah Miller did not steal my medication." His calm voice carried farther than any shout. "She prevented me from making a dangerous mistake." He turned toward Vanessa without raising his voice. "From this moment forward, no one in this room will question her integrity without questioning mine as well." The words struck harder than public anger ever could. Vanessa forced a smile, but it no longer looked convincing. Adrian then did something no one expected. Instead of speaking for Hannah, he stepped away from the microphone and offered it to her. "The stage is yours." For several long seconds, Hannah simply stared at him. No powerful man had ever handed her a voice instead of speaking over her. She took a slow breath. "My name is Hannah Miller," she began. "Every night I work harbor light because people recovering from war deserve the same chance to rebuild their lives that many of us take for granted. Photographs of veterans, therapists, and aging treatment rooms appeared on the screens behind her. She never mentioned herself. She spoke only about hope. When she finished, applause rose slowly, then spread across the ballroom until nearly everyone was standing. Several business leaders immediately pledged emergency donations to keep Harbour Light open. Vanessa watched years of careful planning begin slipping away. Then Hannah's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen. The color drained from her face. Only 4 words appeared beneath an unfamiliar number. Harbour Light is burning. Without a word, Hannah ran toward the exit. Adrian was already following. Snow swirled beneath the headlights as 2 black SUVs raced through downtown Chicago. Sirens echoed across the frozen streets long before Harbour Light appeared through the smoke. Orange flames climbed the old brick walls while firefighters guided frightened patients into the bitter night. Stretchers lined the sidewalk. Oxygen tanks hissed. Someone called Ethan's name, but no answer came. Hannah ignored the chaos around her. She found Dr. Samuel Pierce sitting inside an ambulance, his forehead wrapped in bandages. Ethan, he whispered weakly. They took him. He wouldn't leave without the records. What records? The Foundation files. Adrian's expression hardened. Marcus Reed approached carrying a clear evidence bag. We found this behind the building. Inside lay Marcus's own security access card. Several officers exchanged uneasy glances. It was used to unlock the rear entrance, one investigator reported. Marcus stared at the card in disbelief. I lost that yesterday. For one dangerous moment, the freezing air felt perfectly still. Years inside, the Blackwood organization had taught everyone the same lesson. Betrayal was answered quickly. Adrian looked directly at Marcus. His oldest security chief did not defend himself. He simply waited. Before Adrian could speak, Hannah stepped closer to the evidence bag. May I? The detective nodded. She studied the electronic log displayed on a tablet, then compared it with the worn edges of Marcus's work gloves. No. Every eye turned toward her. Marcus always scans with his left hand. She gently rotated the digital image. The card entered the reader from the right side. Marcus slowly raised his scarred right arm. Old fractures had left 2 fingers permanently stiff. He couldn't have held the card that way. Silence settled across the parking lot. The detective frowned. She's right. Adrian lowered his gaze. For the first time in years, he stopped himself before condemning someone on instinct alone. He looked at Marcus. We keep investigating. Relief crossed Marcus's face, though worry quickly returned. A technician hurried from the burned records room carrying a damaged hard drive. We recovered part of the security footage. The grainy video flickered across the portable monitor. Smoke blurred most of the hallway. Then one image froze everyone in place. Ethan climbed into a dark SUV before the fire spread. He wasn't dragged. He wasn't running. He walked beside Daniel Cross. As the screen went black, Hannah whispered only one sentence. He wanted us to find something. The words lingered in the frozen air, long after the ambulance doors closed. Around them, Harbour Light still smouldered beneath drifting snow, its broken windows glowing with the last traces of fire. Adrian watched Hannah stare at the ruined building without shedding a single tear. Somehow, her silence hurt more than grief. By sunrise, she was gone. The small room she rented above an old bakery was almost empty when Adrian arrived. A folded blanket rested on the sofa. Ethan's framed military photograph remained on the shelf. Hannah had left everything except the worn canvas bag she always carried. Marcus stood quietly behind Adrian. "We can assign protection." Adrian slowly shook his head. "If I order guards to follow her now, she'll feel like a prisoner." Instead, he climbed the narrow staircase alone. Hannah opened the apartment door after a long silence. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I know." Neither of them mentioned Harbour Light. Neither mentioned Ethan. Finally, Hannah looked away. "Everyone close to me gets hurt." Adrian recognized the sentence because he had carried the same belief since Caleb died. He placed a thick folder on the kitchen table. "I won't ask you to come back." She looked surprised. "I won't tell you what to do either." He stepped toward the door. "But when you're ready to fight, call me." For the first time, Adrian walked away without expecting obedience. Hours later, the apartment remained completely still. Outside, snow tapped gently against the window. Hannah finally opened the folder. Inside were property records, foundation payments, Harbour Light maintenance reports, and photographs recovered from the burned office. Most people would have seen meaningless paperwork. Hannah noticed numbers. Every suspicious payment ended with the same 4 digits. Her heartbeat quickened. She hurried to Ethan's therapy notebook lying beside the couch. Page after page contained rehabilitation exercises marked with identical numbers. Not dates, coordinates. The sequence traced a route across Chicago, ending near Blackwood Shipping's oldest refrigerated warehouse beside the harbor. Then Hannah found one final note written in Ethan's familiar handwriting. "If you figure this out, don't come alone. It isn't the money they're protecting. It's what happened the night Caleb died." For the first time since the fire, Hannah reached for her phone. She wasn't calling Adrian for rescue. She was calling because she finally knew where the truth was waiting. Less than an hour later, Hannah stood inside Adrian's penthouse overlooking the frozen Chicago River. Maps, financial reports, and surveillance photographs covered the conference table. Marcus Reed, Dr. Pierce, and Adrian's attorney listened without interrupting as Hannah carefully laid Ethan's therapy notebook beside the recovered foundation records. "The numbers aren't account codes," she said. "They're location markers." She traced a line across the map with her finger. Every payment moved through companies that own property near Blackwood Shipping's oldest refrigerated warehouse. Marcus frowned. "So Harbour Light was never the real target?" "No," Hannah answered quietly. "It was the cover." Adrian leaned closer. "Go on." Hannah opened another page from Ethan's notebook. Hidden beneath taped therapy charts was a flash drive. He knew someone would search his room, she whispered. No one would search his recovery exercises. The attorney inserted the drive into a secure laptop. Hundreds of files appeared: property transfers, foundation payments, shipping schedules. Then one recording stopped everyone. 7 years earlier, Caleb Blackwood had secretly met with a federal investigator. He had uncovered evidence that Vanessa's father and several executives were selling Blackwood shipping routes to a rival organization. Caleb planned to tell Adrian the next morning. He never had the chance. The ambush that killed him had not been random. It had been arranged. Silence settled over the room. Adrian closed his eyes. For years he had blamed himself for surviving. Now he understood his brother had died trying to protect him. Marcus broke the silence. Ethan found all this? Hannah nodded. He stayed at Harbour Light because no one would suspect a disabled veteran was investigating financial records. Another message appeared on the screen. Live video. Ethan sat tied to a chair inside a refrigerated warehouse. Vanessa stepped into view. She looked directly into the camera. "Bring Hannah," she said calmly. "She's the only one who understands what these records mean." She smiled without fear. "And Adrian?" Her voice turned colder. "If you arrive with police, security teams or helicopters, your brother's truth dies with Ethan." The screen went black. No one spoke. Hannah looked at Adrian. "I have a plan," she said. For the first time since they met, Adrian did not argue, did not give an order, and did not try to protect her by sending her away. He simply answered, "I'm listening." Before dawn, 3 black SUVs rolled silently toward the abandoned refrigerated warehouse beside Chicago's frozen harbor. Adrian had accepted every detail of Hannah's plan. Marcus positioned emergency crews beyond the shipping yards. Adrian's attorney released encrypted copies of Caleb's evidence to federal investigators with instructions to send them automatically if anyone failed to report back. Hannah insisted on one condition: no shooting unless there's no other choice. Adrian nodded. "You have my word." Inside the warehouse, icy air drifted through steel beams. Ethan sat restrained beside rows of industrial cooling tanks, while Vanessa calmly waited near the control panel. "I wondered how long it would take," she said. Hannah stepped forward first. "You never wanted the money?" Vanessa smiled. "I wanted the truth buried forever." She admitted Harbour Light had been targeted because Ethan had uncovered financial records connecting her family to Caleb's murder. The charity foundation had simply hidden the transfers. Caleb had discovered everything years ago, and his death had protected the conspiracy ever since. Then Vanessa activated the emergency cooling system. Warning alarms echoed through the warehouse. Marcus rushed to free Ethan while Adrian moved toward Vanessa. A sudden burst of pressure threw Adrian against a steel railing, sending pain through his injured leg. He collapsed before reaching the controls. "Hannah, go!" he shouted. She refused to freeze. Remembering Ethan's rehabilitation lessons, she followed the colored maintenance pipes instead of the warning lights. Hidden behind a service door, she found the manual pressure release and shut the system down seconds before the overloaded tanks ruptured. The alarms stopped. Silence returned. Outside, police vehicles entered through the open gates. Daniel Cross attempted to escape with financial records, only to discover Hannah had already sent every file to investigators before leaving Adrian's penthouse. There was nothing left to destroy. Months later, Harbour Light reopened inside a bright new building overlooking Lake Michigan. Ethan welcomed new patients using the confidence he had fought so hard to regain. Dr. Pierce smiled as veterans filled the therapy rooms once again. During the dedication ceremony, Adrian stood quietly among the guests while Hannah addressed the crowd. "No one heals alone," she said. "Sometimes hope begins because one person chooses to stay." After the applause faded, Adrian met her beneath the evening lights. "I can't promise life will always be easy," he said softly. She smiled. "I never asked for easy." He offered his hand. "Walk beside me." Hannah slipped her hand into his. This time, neither of them walked alone. And perhaps that was the quiet miracle hidden inside their story. It wasn't the moment Hannah saved Adrian's empire that changed everything. It was the moment Adrian finally chose to trust the woman everyone else had overlooked. Real trust is never built through promises. It's built one choice at a time until someone knows they don't have to carry every burden alone. Hannah and Adrian found each other because they earned that trust through actions, not words. Today, think about someone in your life who has been quietly showing up for you the way Hannah did. Don't assume they already know they're appreciated. A simple thank you or an honest conversation could mean more than you realize. Have you ever met someone who completely changed your first impression? I'd truly love to hear your story in the comments. And if Hannah and Adrian's journey touched your heart, don't miss our next story, because sometimes the greatest acts of courage begin where no one is looking.